You see a very clear human track. We won't go into detail with this one. We've got much clearer ones. But this was identified by the Dallas Crime Lab as a human footprint. And these were just excavated, maybe a week when this picture was taken, and the dinosaur tracks as well. And we found dozens of these, especially individual tracks. This one was downstream, several hundred yards. But I think you can see the very obvious configuration there. But the real strength, I think, comes in sequence. And these had vague impressions in front and behind, but not really clear. Stan Taylor decided to test this in the early 70s by finding two tracks in the river and seeing if they went back up under the riverbank. He said, let's remove these layers of limestone and clay, about 6 feet of alternating layers. And if they continued back up under the riverbank, what would that say about the idea that they were carved? That'd pretty well rip it, wouldn't it? Well, back up under the riverbank, the trail continued. He found 9 more, and we've since then extended it to 14. And these were very clear. You can see the mud push-up around it and the very obvious human configuration. Well, that caused quite a stir, and several people got very excited. Glenn Kuban, though, came up with an explanation for this. He says, look, we've got some of these duck-shaped tracks that erode to look like the shape on the right, but these elongate tracks erode to wind up like what you see down at the lower right-hand corner, which is kind of human-like. You see, this is just an eroded dinosaur track, and that's the way he explained it. It wouldn't really explain that mud push-up, and the real clear configuration are not likely. And the real problem is when you look at these tracks, you see that raised infill that with erosion doesn't erode to look like a human track. It gets sharper and clearer. And these are extremely clear and getting clearer as the matrix erodes away from it. Looking at a side view, you can see as that matrix erodes away, it's being made more pronounced. And so those duck-shaped tracks, as well as some of the elongate tracks, show this raised center. Plus, notice the cast that was made by Stan Taylor back in the 70s when he uncovered this trail initially. The detail just defies the idea of an eroded. Does this look like an eroded dinosaur track to you? If you had more dark, you could see it a little more clearly. When you put a human foot in it, it just fits perfectly, and that's really the best. You put your foot in it and you feel that molded shape. It's very persuasive. We extended the track further back to the south, and this is the track that really persuaded me, and you have to look at it carefully for a moment. Here is the dinosaur track that's about 25 inches long. But look what stepped in the middle of it. You see all 5 toes and instep and heel just extremely clear right in the middle of it. Now, if it gets any clearer than that, then it has to be carved. If it's not this clear, then it's just erosion. But we've had some say both about this, and so it must be just right. In fact, when I made the first presentation of this one at a national science meeting in Tennessee, Glenn Kuban, who had gotten Humanist of the Year for his explanation of eroded dinosaur tracks, which shows how much the humanists were concerned about this argument, just went berserk. And it was interesting to watch him. And he got on a plane the next morning, which was Sunday morning, and flew to Glen Rose, and was in the river that afternoon with a big iron bar. And the owner of the property called me and said, he's out there with an iron bar. And we got out 2 days later, and we could see what had been done to that track. This was just beat to a pulp. Now, we had got stereo photographs. We have casts and molds. It's well documented. But I think he was just documenting how much that bothered him. That one you can still see in a beat-up fashion, but there are a number of others in this sequence that are very impressive. This is several tracks up. This is +6. That was -3. And notice the 3 dinosaur tracks in the anterior portion, but again, something stepped here back toward the heel, a little further back in it. Looking at a side view of that track, you can see to the right the 3 dinosaur tracks that are almost flush. May become pronounced with further erosion. But the depressed portion is extremely human-like, especially when you put a human foot in it. Now, if these are human tracks, we should be able to measure them and see, all right, this is this length, and then this is the same length ahead. And we ought to be able to see a sequence of rights and lefts and rights and lefts, which is not going to be produced by erosion. Now, this one is a right. Directly ahead of it should be, this is the one directly ahead of it, a left. And we can actually see right, left throughout the whole sequence. Now, this is one that's, I think, very clear. This is the way it looked when we first saw it. Just to the upper right-hand corner, you can see something going on up there, but you can't tell. With a little more erosion, the next year we were able to see more clearly, and looking at a side view of that track, and you can see the sandbags in the background. This is at the bottom of the river. You can see the human track with the dinosaur track beside it, not within it, but beside it, and sometimes they're across. There's 134 dinosaur tracks on this platform with a sequence of 14 human tracks going right through the middle. And so sometimes they're within and sometimes across and sometimes beside. But you have here the entire sequence demonstrated of the human tracks and then an obvious trail of brontosaurus tracks going across at about a 30-degree angle. Now that's impressive evidence, not just something, well, that looks like a human foot. Well, you see lots of funny-looking things in rocks, but a right-left sequence. Now you find, when you look into clouds, you see clouds that maybe look like a bird, or you look at a cliff sometimes and you can see the old man in the mountain. Now, did erosion do that, or was it carved? Well, how would you tell? Well, if you saw 4 old men in the mountain, you'd have a real good idea that wasn't erosion, would you? When you see 14 in a right-left pattern, this is not erosion. Besides that, it's excavated, almost all of them, from under the overburden. We see the analysis like this. All of